When someone gets there, go ahead and read 33, beginning at verse 18.
And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Paddan Aram, and he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. Then he erected an altar and called it El Eloi Israel.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay.
Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her, and he lay with her and humbled her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the maiden and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Give me this maiden for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his cattle in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with them. The sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry, because he had wrought folly in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Is that it, verse 7?
No, we want to go through verse 12.
But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. I beg you, give her to him in marriage. Make marriages with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you, dwell and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask of me ever so much as marriage present. Ask of me ever so much as marriage present and gift, and I will give according to you, as you say to me. Only give the maiden to be my wife."
All right, good. Wow, this chapter, probably more than any chapter we've looked at for quite some time, is there's a lot out there as far as what in the world and why in the world is this included in the text here. You know, Jacob's been on a roll. We've been looking at him and watching him as he's his adventures and his life and all of that, and now all of a sudden this story of Dinah is inserted into the text, and of course there's all kinds of opinions of why that is. By way of review, first of all, we've looked at look at Jacob arriving in this place called Shechem. Shechem is his first entry point into the land of Canaan, the promised land. He's operating under the promise that God had promised him way back when he was headed out towards Haran years ago, 20 plus years ago, I think it was longer, that God was going to give him this land. So he's operating under that, and now he's entered back in with now a full family. We've read about his encounter with his brother at Peniel, and now he's entering in. It says he entered safely, and that's really an important thing because that was part of that promise way back when he was at Bethel and had that dream 20-some years before. But yet the question was raised last week: why Shechem? Why did he settle here? Because really, he's 50 miles away, 35 miles away from Bethel. He's a short distance. Why did he settle here? Because Bethel was tied to the place of promise. And we talked about it last week, and you guys came up with these ideas here. Basically, number one, he was tired. He'd been on the road for quite some time, and this is good enough. Shechem seemed to be good enough. You guys came up with someone said that, of course, this would be an argument from silence, that he heard from God and he was operating in obedience to what he had heard. And then Charlie right here made a really good correlation because this is a place that Abraham, years and years ago, his grandfather, had set up an altar, and he was possibly making a correlation there. Of course, all of this is just conjecture. We don't really know, but we do know that he settled there. He bought property in Shechem. What it really sets the scene for what we're going to be looking at today. Because he settles there, he buys property there, and now that really brings us right into the same characters here in chapter 34. So let's go on and look at this and try to make some sense out of it. We've read the text, and before I go into any further, I've made an observation here that I want to throw out to you guys. Is, we've been looking at Jacob's life for quite some time, and I'm seeing a change that I think also correlates with a man's life in a general sense. We have seen Jacob up to this point, or actually in chapter 33, as being the center character within his life. And it's about Jacob's actions and how he is affecting and infecting his life, his world around him. Jacob is the central character in the story. In chapter 33, I think is a huge encounter, a huge event in this man's life, this wrestling with this angelic being, God Almighty. I said two different terms there. I think it was actually wrestling with God himself, which is kind of blows my mind. But he had an encounter that was unbelievable, and it changed his life. And we looked at that. We've been looking at as a transformational experience. Now, this does not mean happily ever after, but there was a transforming experience where he has seen the face of God. I don't see how anybody could make that statement and walk away any different, walk away the same. So I'm looking at the story is now filtering down to this culmination point at Peniel. And now, from here on out, guys, the story is going to change. Now, I've cheated. I've read ahead a little bit, and I know that from this point on, Jacob becomes a player, a character within his own story, within the context that he has helped to create. And I think that is so true about us men as we age. There's a piece of time, there's a period of time, especially as a younger man, that we're the central character. We're built that way, and the world is, the way we think is about how the world revolves around us. And I'm not looking at this as a derogatory, self-centered kind of thing. It's natural that we look at that. But often, many of us have a dynamic and a very important encounter. In this case, it's with God, and I think it could be in a number of different ways that brings us to a point of our own bankruptcy, our own loss, a huge loss. And from that point on, there's a change that happens, and we become a character. It's what the world that we've helped to create is now doing to us. Jacob is playing an entirely different role within this story, as we're going to look at in just a minute. Yes.
I keep thinking of the first line in that book, The Purpose-Driven Life. It's not about you.
Takes a long time to learn that.
It takes a long time to learn that.
All right, thanks, Bill. Well, okay, now secondly, because I want to build this and kind of set a context, a framework for how we're going to look at chapter 34, the whole question of Dinah. As you're aware, especially in the text of the Pentateuch as this whole story is developing about Israel, there's very few women that are mentioned. And maybe we should edit this section out, but it is true. But in this case, Dinah is mentioned. And here I've put on here, now I'll get to the point being in just a minute, but I'm building a case here for this whole thing. It shows Jacob, this chart shows Jacob's two wives and his two concubines, and how the children are spread across, who bore who. Well, down here is Dinah, and she's child number 11, and she was, of course, the birth mother is Leah. And she's first mentioned in 30 verse 21 that Leah bore Dinah. This is similar, and then now the story, the writer is now going to pick up the story, and I'm building a case that this chapter is not just something that was thrown in, but there is a strategic, the writer of this book, maybe Moses, maybe somebody else, it may be a group of people, we're not going to get into that, but the writer of this book is using intentionality here to mention Dinah and now pick up the story here in chapter 34, similar to and parallel to Rebekah, who also is a woman. Her first mention is in 22-23, and then, of course, the big story in chapter 24, the Isaac seeking a bride for Isaac. Rebekah becomes a major player in that story. There's a purpose. There was a mention, and now there is a purpose. And so this, I believe, chapter 34 is here for a reason. And we're going to look at possibly why that reason is in this study. So anyway, point being, there's a reason. There's a purpose. We need to pay attention here. What is the author trying to tell us here through this story, and how does it relate to the bigger story of Jacob and his adventures? The flow of the text is the violation occurs. A young man goes out, rapes a young woman. Dinah is probably age 15 at this time. We get that. Chapters 1 through 3. Verses 1 through 3. Shechem, who is the violator, makes his demand. He is the entitled son, the prince of the land. Dad, get her for me. You can just see his youthful demands. I need this woman. And so that's in verse 4. Contrast verse 5. Jacob is silent. Yeah, get that? The demands of the young man, Shechem, Jacob is silent. Now don't judge him too quick, will you? Okay. Jacob is silent. Movement 4, Hamor, who is Shechem's father, he initiates. He goes out to Jacob as the father of the offender, and he, representing the people, the local people, the entrenched people, the population, he is there representing as an elder the people, and he's there, goes to the visiting entity, and to make this right. We want to make this right. And notice how notice the language. What is the language he uses? What do you observe in there? What's the language he uses?
Whatever amount is required.
Well, in order for him to say that, he has to have the resources to back it up. Now that's actually Shechem. Shechem the son is saying, guys, I want your sister, I want your daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes. But Hamor, his father, what is the language he uses? I mean, you hit on it, but he says, we want you to intermarry. We want you to move freely in the land. Well, this guy is coming from a perspective that he has ownership of that land, and he has the authority to make those claims. We want you as an invited guest to move about and give you freedom, and we want to build the relationship here. That's what he's saying.
He wants a merger.
He wants a merger, yes. That's really true. Okay, so 5, the brothers hear about this in the field, and they come back and they are furious of what has occurred, that this young man has raped their sister. But what is the language of the text? Notice in verse 7, read the text, and what do you do? What's the language of the text here? Yeah?
Two words pop out.
You wrought folly.
Okay. Look more.
There's
There's an interesting phrase in there.
The men were grieved and they were very angry.
Okay.
Because it-
Why? Why?
Because it was an outrageous thing that they'd done. By lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done.
In,
Israel.
whoa.
Israel.
What do you think of that, Jim?
They're accepting the promise of Yahweh.
Bingo.
They're saying,
You've got to remember, they've only been in the land for a few weeks. They've never been in this land, and they're tying the rape of their sister, and they're naming the land, which is putting an ownership upon this land of which they are guests within this land. Do you see that?
Well, what they said, but my text says within Israel, so I'm not sure if they're referring to the land per se or within this tribe, which has a new name, by the way, of Israel.
Yeah.
Within the family, I'm not sure if that's
The term Israel, guys, when did Israel occur?
just recently.
Just
The next
yeah.
chapter.
Yeah, Dad has talked to his sons about what's going on here. And we've got to believe, I think, through that very statement, that they see themselves as part of this promise. And that land is theirs. So you've got, why didn't they come in and said, this should not have been done. This is an atrocity. But the writer ties this event to the land. Notice, here it is. The land is a critical piece within this text. How Jacob's brothers tie this violation to the land, and how this should not happen within the land. They're exercising judicial ownership, judicial powers over this land. They're making a judgment that this should not happen within this land. And think about it, they're guests within the land.
I'm still trying to make the connection with the land. I mean, it will eventually be that, but I'm not sure when they say within Israel, whether they mean the hard soil we're prodding our feet upon, or within this family here that you're breaking.
In the
apart.
family of Israel?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering where, I mean, you're saying it's land, I can't argue with that, so I'm not sure if they're just saying this shouldn't have been done within our family. I'm not
I think it's really, really interesting that the use of the word
yeah,
Israel.
it's huge.
Israel is a covenant word. And let me go on, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're, in my opinion, Bill, they're tying this to a larger context, their ownership of the land. Secondly, Hamor, who is the true patriarch of the land, he's saying, we're going to give you freedom. Let's do the merger, as Bill is saying, and we'll give you freedom. We'll intermarry, and this will be one big, happy family. In my opinion, Bill, two entities claiming ownership of the same land. And this incident with Dinah is actually bringing this idea out.
Do you think there's some sort of a feeling of entitlement on Hamar's part because he sold the land to Jacob?
I have no doubt. Yeah. I think Hamor is acting in a very natural, responsible way to try to make amends of this very tragic situation. He's trying to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And this, what his son has done, he's trying to make it better. And then Shechem, his son, obviously, it doesn't say he came. It says Hamor went out, but obviously Shechem was there too. And then he speaks up. Picture this whole crowded room like this, and Hamor is making his case, and how let's take a bad situation and let's make it better.
Well,
And
it's driven by by Shechem's affection. Well, I mean, it's not like they're trying to just right it wrong.
Well, I'd say
He's
lust.
progressing. It's lust, but I want this woman for my wife, and he's
Yeah.
tenderly. There's this strange follow-up to this rape.
yeah, he's acting out of a very irresponsible, lustful act, he's taking responsibility, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They want to make it right.
And no one knows Dinah's opinion on this.
No.
She's
No, no, no.
It's just a pawn.
Yeah. You should read some of the commentators on this. It's really funny how she kind of, she was responsible for me. She shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
It's really funny where people go with this stuff. So, so Shechem, he picture him in a room like this, and all of this is going on, and his dad is trying to do this, and then he pops up out of the crowd and says, guys, he doesn't say he's sorry, but I want this young woman as my wife, and here is a blank check. Here's a blank check. I will give you whatever you want, a signed blank check. And so what I want you to do here, in just the, we'll do 5-6 minutes, and then we'll come back and summary. Around your tables, here's the question, table talk. What possible scenarios? You're in this room and this has happened. The brothers are there. Jacob is there. Hamor is there. Shechem is there. And the blank check is now on the table. What are the possible scenarios of this event? What if they're handed a blank check? What are the possible scenarios? Why don't you just talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll get together and wrap it up. So.
Trump's going to come in and make a deal.
A blank check. There's few times in life we get a blank check.
Well,
Let's. I'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll talk about
I
it.
think Hamor is trying to diffuse the blame and say, this is going to be for greater good because now we want to intermingle with you. Look at this. Yeah.
Kills people or whatever.
He applies it two-way arrangement, but it's merger.
Yeah.
But we know we dissolve it and diminish it.
I'm curious though.
The land shall be open before you, live
So that's a whole different perspective.
intermarry with those
So
I created all
how
things.
maybe both sides of the family are going to be
at this time. Is he 80?
Plus,
Not Jacob, how old is Judah?
who?
Judah.
Judah, the first son.
You guys expect me to have the answer to that?
Yes. But 7
He's probably
years.
60.
He had a 7 year stint.
So
in Henderson, I would say 20 plus years. I think it was longer.
So Judas probably, he was 20.
It was 20.
Maybe 30s.
I was gonna say, I said 60.
Over son.
Yeah.
I thought you said it was 60s. It was in here.
When was Judah born?
Oh, he was born right after you.
Okay, so 30, say 30. Yeah, okay, you're right.
Young bucks.
I lose track. So, you had the better answer than I did.
So, what we're trying to get at is Dinah the only daughter?
Dinah is the only daughter of
And he says, we want to marry your daughter.
I brought this out. Dinah is now she's mentioned as Bernie's and now this fall.
She's come on a fairly central but she becomes a fairly central character in this. But I think Hemar is trying to diffuse the blame for his son by saying, now you want to marry with us.
What are the brothers pissed at? Are they pissed that that was rape? Are they pissed that his tribe is trying to intermarry and diffuse their tribe? I mean, is
Man, all these are great questions.
how big of a deal is rape?
Well, you can go to jail today for it.
Yeah, but how big of a deal was
Unless you're a politician.
Yeah.
was it a horrible offense? Was it
Yeah.
how big of a deal was it?
Yeah, it's hard for us to put it. All right, guys, let's get back together. It sounds like you really had some fun with this because wow, this is open here. This is open. We're on an adventure. We're trying to explore this. What are some of the ideas you came up with? What are some of the scenarios? Yeah. What's that? Okay, a little more.
It's the term that's been applied, particularly in our contemporary society, of parents with children who commit crimes, and because they're affluent, they do whatever they need to do to get their child off, including bribery and money and leaving the country and everything else, because our child can do no wrong, so we need to.
He doesn't know any better because he's never suffered the consequences.
Right.
So in this case, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but he's trying to buy them off. Okay, so it's a setup. So Hamar is attempting to buy out his son's irresponsible actions. So brothers beware. Okay, good. Anybody else? A contrary opinion.
We had one.
Yeah.
I
Of
have.
course you would.
Yeah, why doesn't that surprise us?
We don't have any law of God yet. We don't have any Torah. We don't have anything that codifies what's right and wrong to a certain extent. And how big of a deal is rape? I don't know back in those days. I think their offense was he was trying to marry into the family and diffuse the promise, basically dissolve Israel by merging it and kind of, I think they're more worried about what's going to happen as a result of this bargain. Such a thing shouldn't happen within Israel. More than I just don't know how big of a deal it was that their sister was raped. I mean, it looks like a big deal, but I'm not sure if that's what their major concern was.
Well, Bill, then what does the word defiled mean? Isn't that a violation of the
That's a
law?
violation, you're right, I think,
That's what
but
the
is
text
that,
says.
but everyone says they're trying to buy the son off.
Would-
It's not like they're trying to cover the rape. His son wants him for a wife, he's not trying to make amends, he wants to marry this lady.
Would you agree that, would everybody agree that what Shechem did, at least the perspective of the characters within the text, everyone in the text names this as it was a wrong thing to do?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. All right.
So it may not have been a written code, but it was a moral code within that culture.
Mhm.
Okay, And then was there a concern that she'd been raped, or is there concern that they're trying to marry her and merge the tribes?
I think there's another one is, when I read this, having lived in the Middle East, and this exact same situation is going on over and over and over again, it's still, and they think tribally. And so it's a violation of the daughter, and now she'll never be able to be married because she's been violated. And it's an offense against the tribe, and they just think tribally. And so the reaction to this, I think, is a typical Middle Eastern tribal reaction. They've come again, they've violated not just the 15-year-old, which may be a big deal, may not be a big deal, depending on how they're thinking, but they've violated the tribe. And the reaction is the tribe has to protect its honor, has to react, and what they did is just normal.
Yeah,
And
good.
there's two tribes different thoughts, because one,
Yeah.
the Canaanites worship sticks and the stars, and Jacob's children worship the God of Abraham.
And-
Big difference.
Okay, where we want to dig into this and just look at it. We bring our biases to the text. All of us do that. But we're going to look at we're going to go on with this next week and look at this. Thank you guys so much for your input. The only question the thought I want to leave with you is this: who is acting more honorably in the text? I'll leave that with you. Have a good.
In the text we just read, or the text to come?